So welcome everyone to another virtual VDD. So for the viewers who are now looking at YouTube, we're just started in a bit. It's different than usual because it's a hands-on today. And Michael, our Plöd is with me today. We're gonna do some context mapping. And yeah, so please, if you have any questions, feel free to ditch it in the chat on YouTube. I'm keeping an eye on it. And you can hopefully enjoy and learn something from where you are. Back to you, Michael. Do you want to, or is it Michael? My brother-in-law is called Michael.
Call me Michael. I am German, so my name is Michael, but I'm fine with Michael, Mike, whatever you prefer. Yeah, I'm flexible regarding these things. Right, so welcome everyone. It's great that there was so much interest in that session. So if everyone shows up from the folks who have signed up on meetup.com, we will have a pretty crowded place. For the people joining in, yeah, please go to the Miro board, which I have just posted to the chat, and I think Kenny did the same. And please fill out the two areas in the check-in section. That's going to be very, very important for today because this is a hands-on. That means I don't plan to explain a lot about context map. So this is not going to be a talk where I talk about context maps. We will apply context maps in practice. In order for you, some folks are moving stuff around on the Miro board. Let me quickly lock this one.
Want me to share the Miro board so that the viewers can also see?
Yeah, wait a minute. Let me quickly repair some stuff. Okay, and lock this and lock that as well. So I'll quickly share the Miro board. So if you just pick something, how are you today? What have you done? How would you rate your experience with context maps? Please enter in this section your Zoom name and your experience. The reason is since this is not going to be a talk where I talk and explain a lot about context map, this is a hands-on, I plan on building groups of all of you together. And I want to mix people with experience and people with no experience at all into groups. It doesn't make sense to build a group with folks who have not a lot of experience about context maps. Yeah. So the plan is for today, we will work on a case study. Yeah, the case study is I have a text document shared about that. There is a brief event storming example for that, and also some domain message flows. I will give you some explanation about the case study in a verbal form, but I'll also grant you some time to read through it, to check it out. And then we will do 3 working iterations. Each iteration will take 15 minutes of group work. And I will give you a task for each iteration. Yeah, for instance, hey, please check out this bounded context and this bounded context and take a close look at, for instance, an anti-corruption layer conformist or open host services, for instance, which are popular or very common context mapping patterns. Yeah? If you want to check out more details about context maps in your group work, I've shared with you a slide deck to a context mapping talk, which I do quite regularly at meetups and conferences, for instance, at VDDD Europe 2020. I did that slide deck as well. And on the working boards, I'll go to one board to show you how that looks. I have shared the stuff which I have contributed to the DDD crew GitHub organization, yeah, where also Kenny is active, folks like Christina Hirt or Nick Thune and many others who share stuff there. And so, for instance, here is a context mapping cheat sheet, yeah, which gives you a explanation of all of the patterns, including a proposal for a visual representation. I have all the icons for that over there as well. This Miro template is also downloadable at the DDD crew GitHub organization. Yeah, so you can use that for your own work after the workshop. It's all Creative Commons free for use, and you can do whatever you want with that. And over there, I've also given you some small examples about possible context map scenarios. So the task for today is that you get your hands dirty with that stuff, yeah, that you just use these things. We could spend hours and hours and hours and hours discussing those patterns, yeah? But I always see that this may be fun for some people, but most people need to apply them in practice. And that's why we do it in a hands-on way this time around. Yeah. I have planned to let the meetup go until 9 p.m. Yeah, and usually I'm pretty strict in terms of time management. So I have the assumption that we will hit the 9 p.m. spot. Please don't have the expectation that you will solve the whole case study with a big context map. Yeah, that's not feasible in 3 iterations of each 15 minutes. And that's not the ambition that we follow there. The ambition is to give you some complexity, yeah, and the patterns, that you play around with them. After each iteration, I will give you a brief explanation, yeah, how my thoughts are, what I would do, and I will also post a solution. I don't like the term solution because it feels so like the ultimate truth. And as you know, all models are wrong. Some of them are useful. I consider that to be a useful model in terms of a context map. And yeah.
So Michael, in 5 years, we will have the Michael Plöd model everywhere in the world.
Yeah,
everyone copy pasted it.
Yeah, for mortgage loan, the Michael Plöd mortgage loan template model. Okay, I need to license that and start selling certifications for it. That would be awesome. No, won't happen. So, as I said, this is a hands-on session. Are there any questions from your side so far? No questions so far. So let me quickly check out how many people do we have as participants?
I have a question. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Michael.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I went through a bit of trouble connecting at the beginning. I missed. I see people filling in stuff in the Miro board. I don't know what I need to do on the board. Can you just tell me again what I need to do on the Miro board? Please?
Yeah. It's hard to understand you because you have a lot of disturbance in your audio. But I think your question was that you need some help with the Miro board. What you need to fill out there, right?
Yes.
Write your question. Yeah, okay, perfect. So first of all, I'll share the Miro board again in the chat. So give me a minute for that. So this is the Miro board. And on the Miro board, yeah, you can go into those sections and fill out how you are, what you have done today. Yeah, someone was creating a PowerPoint, for instance. Then how would you rate your experience with context maps? Have you done that before? Haven't you done that before? In terms from 1 to 10. And I see already we have a few rather experienced folks. some rather unexperienced folks, that's no problem. But I see over 20 people in the call right now. And I would highly ask you, please fill that out, because it helps me to build the groups for the breakout session where you do your modeling work. Yeah, because I want to mix experienced people with rather unexperienced people. Yeah. So, all right. While you keep filling out that stuff, I still see some folks missing over there. I want to move your attention towards the case study. I've added quite a bit of information to this Miro board. First of all, we have a text document that describes the case study in a little detail. Yeah, so there's some text, a very nice specification, which contains the total truth about everything, as always. I have a brief event storming example, and I will lead you through that in a couple of seconds with some pivotal events, some external systems, some commands, some actors, and also a rather complicated domain message flow, which already contains a bunch of bounded contexts which we are working with. So I will go ahead and I will now use the next 5 minutes and give you a little bit of an explanation about the case study, where I explain it in my own words. Since I created it, I'm probably the one that knows it best. And after that, I will give you 15 minutes of studying time. Please make yourself familiar with the case study. Yeah? Please make yourself, maybe you want to skim a little bit over that slide deck regarding the context map. Yeah, I think the most interesting part about that slide deck will probably be, yeah, somewhere in the middle. Yeah, I think, yeah, starting with slide 33 or something. Yeah, I'll post that to the chat as well so that you have a direct reference for that. That can be interesting as well, because there I describe all of the patterns. So let me jump into the case study. Basically, the case study is about a pug dog who owns a bank. And since pug dogs are usually very greedy, especially for food, they need to earn money, and that's why the dog owns a bank. Yeah, just a hilarious kind of thing. Now he wants us to ramp up a mortgage loan application system, where you apply for a loan as a customer, but for private persons in the retail sector. And we can apply for a loan in there. And the process starts with us going ahead or with some applicants filling out an application form, submitting the application to the bank, where you tell, hey, that's my application for the loan. Please grant it to me, so to say. And then there's some validation going in. And after that, we go into a first step of scoring called the pre-scoring. This scoring runs on the information provided by the applicant. So when I say I earn, let's say, 20,000 euros, and then the pre-scoring believes that. Yeah, it goes ahead and draws a credit term request from a credit agency. We go ahead and determine the account balance on the accounts of the customer if they are a customer. Yeah, we assess the real estate by calculating a collateral value and a market value comparison, and this results in a result green or red. Pre-scoring is red, pre-scoring is green. When pre-scoring is red, we reject the application. We say, oh no, not going to happen. We won't go into business with you. Sorry. No, that's not good. Then if pre-scoring is green, we ask the applicants to prove some information on the application form based on some documents. For instance, we go ahead and ask for a pay slip. We ask for an expose of the real estate, stuff like that. And then a bank clerk checks if some information on the application form is correct. Yeah. And if not, they talk to the customer and maybe they adjust the application. So for instance, someone says, I earned 20,000 euros, but the pay slip says, it's just 5,000 euros. The person lied. Yeah? So they reduced that amount to, hey, sorry, you just earned 5,000 euros. That's what you take in there. When the application has been marked as checked by the bank clerk, sooner or later, bank clerk goes ahead and says, yeah, check, that's okay. We can proceed with that. Yeah. That's the application marked as checked against the documents. We go into the main scoring. Yeah. The difference between main and pre-scoring is the one runs on information provided by the applicant. The other one runs on verified information by a bank clerk. And it uses a different kind of a credit agency request. Yeah, the credit application result. Every main scoring result goes into a manual credit decision where a hierarchy of the bank takes a decision depending on the amount of loans that people have applied for. Yeah? So we ramp up a credit decision template which is just one sheet of paper, for instance, where the main scoring result is, where we say, okay, the real estate assessment with the collateral value and the market value looks like that. And by the way, folks applied for 300,000 euros in loans. So we need 3 hierarchy steps to decide, yeah, in the bank for that one. When all decisions were positive, we offer the applicants a contract. Yeah, that's what we do. Yeah, so we send a contract proposal to the applicants, and when they get back to us in time with a signed contract, yeah, we have an accepted contract proposal. So we have a contract, basically. Maybe the applicant doesn't get back in time. Yeah. Then after 2 weeks, yeah, we send a reminder letter. After 4 weeks, we send a reminder letter. And after 6 weeks, we just say, okay, our proposal is no longer valid. Yeah? In the case of a negative decision, we reject the application again. After that, we need to create the contract in our old school legacy, ugly back office systems, yeah, like an old school CRM behemoth or a core banking system, yeah, where we need to create the credit accounts. And finally, yeah, we calculate a repayment plan and send a welcome letter to the customers. Yeah. So the bounded contexts, which we are going to work with, are listed in the domain message flows. Yeah? And basically you can go through that whole story, yeah? Starting with a bounded context called application registration, yeah? where applicants can submit an application, yeah? that fires off an event. Yeah? This triggers scoring, yeah? For the pre-scoring. Yeah? We assess the real estate. Yeah? Scoring goes ahead and needs to talk to the credit agency, the core banking system. When we have a pre-scoring green, we ask for documents to be uploaded. Yeah. After that, we do the application and document check. Yeah. we finally go into a credit decision after a successful main scoring. Yeah, go into a contract proposal bounded context and a contract creation bounded context. So those are our bounded context candidates that we are going to use there. Yeah, so much for a brief overview for you folks. Jakob just raised a question to me regarding the domain message flows. He found out that there's two bounded contexts called scoring on them. That's true. That means it's the same thing. I just split this one up for readability issues because otherwise, yeah, and Yuns also, I don't know if I pronounce you correctly. It's for readability issues in the flow. Yeah, because we have on the one hand, the pre-scoring part, on the other hand, the main scoring part, but this means it's the same bounded context. Yes. It's intended, and the reason for that is readability. Without further ado, I will now split you up in 4 groups. Yeah. One group won't be in breakout sessions. They will stay in the main room, and this group will go to the main screen, yeah, on the Miro board. Yeah, that's this one over there, the main room. Yeah, and then I have breakout room 2, 3, and I have a breakout room 4. Yeah, just check your room number and you can go to the respective Miro boards. I'll now go over to the board for the second group for this breakout session. And as you can see, yeah, I depicted a couple of bounded contexts over there. Like here, scoring, we only have it once. Yeah, in the domain message flow, it was in there twice for readability reasons. Real estate assessment and reference properties. Then we have contract proposal, contract creation, the manual credit decision, the application registration, document upload, application check. Now, in the first iteration, we will focus on 3 patterns. 3. The one is open host service. The other is conformist. The next one is anti-corruption layer. All these 3 patterns you will usually find in a so-called upstream downstream relationship. Usually, the open host service, which can be seen as something like a public API, one bounded context, offers their services through a dedicated API. That can be a synchronous one or also the publishing of events. Yeah, and the others in the downstream, they get a model through that open host service. Now, how do they consume that model? Are they conformists? Do they conform to that model? Or do they transform that model in terms of an anti-corruption layer where we have a model-to-model transformation going on usually at the adapter level of the software architecture. But that can also be a dedicated microservice or anything like that. I don't want to go into any implementation details. Now, if you take a look at those 3 patterns, where do you have use cases for that? Let me give you a brief example. I think, for instance, and you can copy and paste those patterns over there, that I'm pretty sure that we have an open host service on the open host service, open host service on the core banking system and on the credit agency. Now, in terms of scoring, I also think that we may have an open host service on the external data providers, where we integrate with the reference properties. And I think we should harmonize those this information with an anti-corruption layer, for instance. So we can add an ACL there and then build a connection to them. Usually I don't do any arrows on those things. And we have a clear upstream downstream relationship between the 2. So we can add the U and the D over there. We can add them on those things as well. So now in your groups, take 10 minutes of time and find out where you have use cases for open host services. Where do you have use cases for anti-corruption layers? Where do you have maybe a use case for a conformist, for instance? Yeah? Make up assumptions. Yeah, play around with those patterns. Yeah, play. If this is the case, then I may have that pattern, because that helps you in collecting a bunch of heuristics for the patterns, maybe. Okay, then I would start the sessions, and I will bring you back in 10 minutes. Okay?
Where can we see the groups?
The groups, you will see them when you're in the breakout session. Yeah. When I start the breakout session, you will see on the top of the screen you're in breakout session 4, in room 2, or in room 3, or you're in the main room. And then when you don't get moved to a breakout session, then you just stick in the main room and you go to that board. I will iterate. Yeah, after I've initialized the breakout sessions, I'll go through every session and tell you you're 2, you're 3, you're 4. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have fun. Yeah, the others, they are now in the breakout sessions. I'll leave the main session for now. Yeah, you're in the main room. I'll go to the other groups and see what they do. Kenny, will you stay in the main room?
Yeah, I'm staying here.
Perfect. So I'll see you.
See you.
I didn't quite understand. Is something expected from us in the main room?
So are you in?
We should click on the link which says main room, and then we will be guided to a different Miro board. That's where I have jumped to.
Yeah, and I see a lot of people there, but besides that, I see 8 people, so that shouldn't be right. But let's just start.
We can profit from some help, huh?
Why does my board say group 1? That's wrong. Okay, I'll try.
Yeah, group 1 is main group, so that's okay.
Oh, okay. So
main room is group 1. Yeah, we switched it up because this way the streaming starts still doing correctly.
To do it one more time, then. Come on. Yes. All right. And he said we can just copy and paste those markers. Yeah, I can see it's possible. I guess it's...
Yeah, if you click on it, then you can...
yeah, so it's something like this. I'm doing the core banking system. I guess it's something like this.
Okay, I'll do why external data providers.
Why would you
adjust your microphone?
Sorry, is it me?
Excuse me?
Can you please adjust your microphone? You're really hard to hear.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Way better.
Okay. It's better?
Yes.
It's better.
Okay. Sorry for that. It's just behind my ear.
You're saying core banking system, open host system? Can you... Curious.
Yeah, well, isn't that a kind of a legacy system with the accounts and the customers? And they are exposing a kind of legacy API, I guess? Something like this?
I would guess too. I don't think we have much influence over them.
And the credit agency is the rating, I guess, credit worthiness rating, and external data providers are the property data, right? So, yeah, I guess the ACL is the right thing for the. I actually haven't got enough information, or I don't remember which context does the translation.
I guess the scoring context will contact the credit agency through the open host, and I would use some anti-corruption layer here so it can be protected from the external domain model. So they see this as a system which we can't influence. Just take it or
Yeah.
leave it.
Okay. Okay. Definitely. So what you're saying is our strategy is to do an anti-corruption layer on the boundary, on the edge of each of our internal context. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then let's do this. Real estate
So,
assessment.
A bit about the anti-corruption layer. The anti-corruption layer doesn't mean specifically that you do translations, because an open host can do translations as well, or maybe not an open host, but for instance, a customer supplier can do translations as well. A anti-corruption layer mostly goes into deeper, is that you create a separate system or layer to decouple this, in this case, the scoring from the rest. So anti-corruption layer doesn't per se mean, or anti-corruption layer always means translation, but it doesn't mean that a customer supplier cannot do a translation. So just so you know.
Okay. Yeah. Understood. Yes.
Another
So suppose,
thing.
Kenny, I just want to verify what you're saying is that suppose we had some influence on credit agency, if there were a customer supplier relationship, we can still do the translation without having ACL explicitly written on the on the customer side. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
ACL means ACL. There's a lot of confusion there. ACL, so anti-corruption layer, is a pattern. Usually you implement it with a separate system that integrates several systems. So in this case, the way you described it is the anti-corruption layer to scoring, make sure that core banking system and credit agency can go consistent to scoring. So that makes sense to me to do it that way. But if it was a customer supplier relationship, that can also imply you still have translation. But...
Yeah.
I think there is a fundamental difference.
Yeah.
Customer supplier is an organizational pattern. It's how various teams talk to each other, who can make requirements against another team and who can't. ACL is about model translation. Yeah, that's not so much organizational.
Okay, Michael, but then a related question would then be, sorry, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, sure. I'm just thinking that if we think about a hexagonal architecture, usually the ACL is on the edge, and then you have you implement it using the adapter pattern. But suppose you have, instead of ACL, put a customer supplier here. Do you then imply that that there is an adapter on the edge of the hexagon of the customer side, or do you explicitly write ACL beside the customer, if you know what I mean?
I think the two, they can be combined. Yeah. One is, I think the ACL is, I always say the ACL is something that you see in the code base. Because you will have some sort of a translation, usually at the edge in an adapter. The customer supplier thing is something you don't see at all in the code base, because it's more a communicational pattern where one team tells another team, hey, you need to do something for me. Yeah. In a controlled manner. It's not like unlimited wish list or something. Yeah. And I don't think that you see that you can't see customer supplier in a code base.
Well, a customer supplier within a customer supplier can still do translations, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it doesn't. So when you go to your hexagon, and customer supplier can still do the translation. That doesn't mean it's an anti-corruption layer per se.
Right.
The anti-corruption layer is more for complex translations and relationship.
You can also have a customer supplier relationship and be a conformist.
Yeah.
What I usually do is, and that's where I usually break away from the classical DDD literature, I usually explain those patterns in terms of various categories. I think conformist and anti-corruption layer describe model propagation. How models propagate. On the one hand, with the conformist, you see a propagation. On the other hand, with the anti-corruption layer, you see a break in the propagation through the translation. Customer supplier, on the other hand, is something that I categorize as an organizational, even it's basically a governance pattern.
Would
and
you
you
say
can
that
take in various perspectives.
Would you say that anti-corruption layer is more or less a go-to pattern when you deal with external systems, which you more or less can't influence?
That's a great question. Let's discuss them in the round. I'll stop the breakout sessions, and that's a good discussion we should have in the big round.
I have another question. Is
Sure.
then the conformist thing, is it not wishful thinking that we just drone the anti-corruption layer in front of the scoring context because we might happen to be conformists?
That's also a great question. I will have that in the round as well. Yeah, it's a really good question. The breakout session starts in 30 seconds. So let's wait for the other participants to join us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think somebody said something really sensible. I think now that on the scoring side, it's probably better to have a conformist. But I don't know. That's
right.
Let's
get everyone together. Can you leave? I don't know who's sharing the screen right now. I think it's Kenny. Yeah, just leave this right there.
Oh, sorry, I said leave it. I'm doing it back. So something with language, right?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, thank you.
Back.
Let's dig into this picture over there. I've briefly skimmed through the other boards and I saw something quite similar with everyone. Yeah, we should have an anti-corruption layer against those external systems. Yeah, an anti-corruption layer is about translation of models. Yeah, so we translate from one language into another language, so to say. Conformist is basically about the propagation. Yeah, and usually I like to explain, when I explain those patterns to folks who didn't have a lot of exposure to context mapping. Yeah, I usually say, if we look at the propagation of models between bounded contexts, I think we address that with the anti-corruption layer or with the conformist. The conformist is a very strong propagation of models. The anti-corruption layer isn't. Now, one question was, shouldn't we have an anti-corruption layer for every integration with an external system there? I think basically that may be a good idea, yes, but it depends. Now imagine the credit agency answers you, let's say this rating has a repayment percentage count, yeah? That the credit agency thinks that I will repay my loan at, let's say, 93%, and that they have a couple of warning messages and negative remarks in their model as well, that they publish through the open host service. Now, which pattern is suitable when you have a set of rules in scoring, and let's say we calculate points, a point-based score and a no-go criteria-based score. What if we have the following set of rules? The repayment percentage equals points in scoring. So if I have 93%, I get 93 points. If I have 3 warning message, that's a no-go criteria. And if I have a negative remark, that's a no-go criteria as well. Would anti-corruption layer still be the pattern of choice here? Not really.
It doesn't add much value.
Yeah, because then suddenly, your rules conform very strictly to that external model. If those are the rules, you need to be a conformist. Another thing in terms of, because that's what I see very often in terms of the conformists. What I see very often is teams going ahead with the strategy, anti-corruption layer everywhere, conformist is bad. I think that's a dangerous strategy. Think about another thing. One bounded context provides computations of values which are highly regulated. Like a collateral value, for instance. That's a highly regulated figure in the mortgage loan business. Do I want to allow others to mess around with that stuff? Maybe not. Or when you say, let's say the credit decision, we have a credit decision template that has, for instance, a scoring result in it, that has a collateral value in it. And now please also take a look when you think about those patterns in terms of the subdomain categories. Let's say scoring and the real estate assessment, they are core subdomains. And especially scoring is pretty much a core subdomain in that area. Credit decision, on the other hand, is something that we consider to be a generic subdomain. Maybe I want to force my generic subdomains to conform in this case. Yeah? That can be an heuristic there. Yeah? I think what I want to bring across as a message, I think anti-corruption everywhere is not a good idea. The world is not black and white. Yeah? There is a space between. Yeah. And I would also say that conformists everywhere are something that's highly problematic because you have unlimited model propagation, so to say. Yeah, and everyone conforms to everyone and it's going to be a mess. Yeah. I think you need to find a good balance between the two. Yeah. Usually I prefer anti-corruption layers, yeah, because they lead to a higher degree of decoupling. Please, or to a looser coupling. Yeah? Anti-corruption layer is not about decoupling. You still have some degree of coupling, yeah? In the translation, in the adapter, but you reduce the amount of coupling. Yeah? So talking in terms of connaissance, with the conformist, your core of your domain model is connaissant to the external model. The anti-corruption layer, probably only your adapters are connaissant. Yeah. There is a very interesting VDDD session where we had a discussion. I think it was me, Nick Thune, Julie Lerman, and I think Indu Alagarsami was also in that session, Kenny, right? Where we discussed, I think, for 1.5 hours about the anti-corruption layer.
Yeah, yeah, and that went into just having a translation layer doesn't mean it's an anti-corruption layer.
Exactly.
It's too long didn't read.
Yeah.
Version. Yeah.
All right. Do you like those longer explanations at the end of the exercise? Do we want to keep that?
Yes, 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 yeah? Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. It's a hard case study, isn't it?
Do we have time for one question?
Sure, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, you said the credit decision domain is a generic subdomain. Does that mean that's a purchased a commercial off-the-shelf system? Or is it... yeah, those systems usually have... Yeah.
I would say, if something is a generic subdomain, that doesn't mean automatically that it is something off-the-shelf purchased. Okay. It's a hint that, hey, maybe you don't want to implement that by yourself. Yeah, it depends on the situation where you are. When you assess an existing IT landscape, yeah, you will probably find many systems in generic subdomains that have been implemented by the company itself. Maybe because they were implemented 10 years ago, where this wasn't a generic subdomain. Yeah, times change. Yeah, maybe nowadays it's generic. Yeah, because there's no way for differentiation. Everyone's doing it the same way, and now there are products available and stuff like that. Yeah. I think when you have a generic subdomain, you could look into that. Yeah. If you look at the case study, the way the credit decision is ramped up, I always joke around in my training courses on TTT and tell the people, hey, you can implement the credit decision in Jira if you want. Yeah, it's so simple. Yeah. There's no way for differentiation in there. Yeah?
Why not Excel, Michael? Come on. Excel.
Excel is the biggest competitor to every self-written business software out there.
Yeah. And then have an Access database underneath somewhere.
Yeah. At IEF Road, in the banking sector has such a common language. Is the credit agency API not a published language instead of an OHS? I would like to postpone that question to after our break, because then I want to discuss with you published languages.
And can you just repeat why the scoring is conforming to the credit agency? Or I didn't understand that.
I think, no, scoring would be a conformist to the credit agency when you have scoring rules that are highly coupled to the model of the credit agency. Let's say credit agency reports, hey, there is a repayment probability of 90% and scoring grants 90 points. Yeah, you have 3 warning messages, that's a no-go criteria. Yeah, so you ramp up the set of rules that make up the scoring, yeah, extremely along the model of the credit agency. Yeah, so if you switch the credit agency, let's say from in Germany the Schufa to something like Arvato InfoScore, yeah, typical credit agency in Germany, that wouldn't be feasible.
Okay.
And that's also the reason at IEF why the credit agency may not be a published language, because their model in which they reply is pretty proprietary. Yeah.
Is there any case when you probably have more than one credit agency you'd like to connect scoring? And then what would happen? Then probably the ACL would be justified to use here.
Then ACL is the strategy of choice.
Beautiful.
Yeah. All right. I would say we continue with the next exercise. I would like, let's just go into 2 more patterns for today. Yeah, we'll do 1 more exercise. I'll give you a little more time for that. Yeah, and I would like to discuss with you published language and customer supplier in the next exercise. Let's start with customer supplier. Customer supplier is a plain organizational pattern. So there is a customer-supplier relationship between teams. The downstream team is considered to be the customer. Downstream requirements factor into upstream planning. Therefore, the downstream team gains some influence over the priorities and tasks of the upstream team. Usually, in an upstream-downstream relationship, the downstream team is helpless. Yeah? They have no power. However, in some circumstances, it may be interesting that certain teams get an influence over the upstream. This influence should be controlled. There should be boundaries for that influence. Yeah? It's not like, hey, wish whatever you want from the upstream and remote control the upstream team. No. There should be a defined set of influence. I want you especially to discuss this relationship between application registration and scoring. Yeah? Who is upstream? Who is downstream? Do we have a customer-supplier relationship? Don't we have a customer-supplier relationship? And the same, I want you to discuss between real estate assessment and the application registration. Yeah, usual, I would say, mortgage loan application form. I don't know, maybe some of you have bought an apartment or a house or something like that and had to deal with such a form. That's usually, at least in Germany, 4 pages of stuff that you need to fill out. That's a real complex beast. Think, who is responsible for that complexity? Yeah. The next pattern I want to go through, I want you to discuss in your groups, is published language. The published language is the well-documented shared language between bounded contexts, which can translate in and out from that language. Published language is often combined with open host service. Yeah? Look at stuff like iCalendar or vCard, yeah? Where you, every calendar app can implement iCalendar and they can talk iCalendar. Yeah? But because iCalendar is a standard, so to say, does every application, every calendar application have an influence on this standard? No. And this is a very interesting thing with regards to the open host service. Would I, for instance, consider the model of the Google Maps API, which is without a doubt an open host service, to be a published language? I don't think so. Because it's, Google has just defined it. It's Google's thing. Yeah? It can become a published language when others start to adopt that, if they are allowed to. Yeah? But I think what I expect from an open host service is a well-documented interface. Yeah? And just by having a well-documented interface, for me personally, and that's my personal opinion here, that doesn't qualify for a published language. A published language is more in my eyes. Yeah, it's a standard, something like that. Yeah, it's a documented, shared language. Yeah, and especially if you look into, for instance, Vaughan Vernon's literature. Yeah, Vaughan only has examples where he combines open host service with published language. I think you can have open host services without a published language. However, please be aware, that's my opinion. And if you look at the definitions in the popular books, there is some vagueness. Yeah? There's room for interpretation there. Others may not agree with me. Yeah? But for my personal work, I found this distinction to be quite applicable. Yeah. Now, what I want you to discuss in your groups as well in the next exercise, where do you see a use case for a published language in our case study? Do you see a use case somewhere? Yeah. who should influence the published language? Yeah. Are there any questions from your side? I think there was something going on in the chat. Given credit agency based on German examples, also proprietary, shall we even consider open hosts on their side? Yes, yeah, because they offer a defined interface. Yeah, they don't offer you direct database access or something like that. Yeah, I think open host service means this bounded context has something like a public API. Yeah, they have that. So that qualifies for me for an open host service. Yeah? Okay. I would say I'll split you up again in the working groups, discuss that for the next, I'll give you 15 to 20 minutes for that. After that, we get back together, discuss your learnings, and then we'll do a wrap up and we'll be okay for today for the hands-on. All right? Cool.
It's the same group as earlier, right?
Yes, yes.
So where should we start?
So the question is, where do we see a need for published language, right?
No, the first question was to decide on the relationship between application registration and scoring contexts.
Oh, sorry, I missed that part.
And then who's upstream, who's downstream, which is kind of tricky. That kind of depends. And
I think here scoring is the driver because they are defining what data they need in order to score a customer. So they're defining the needed information to the application registration.
Yeah.
Are you implying that scoring is upstream? Are you saying that?
I'm not sure. The information is flowing from the application registration to scoring.
Yes.
However, I think the scoring defines what they need.
But yeah, okay. So scoring is one party that can have some influence on application registration. But what about real estate assessment? Doesn't that context also have some influence? And how about the credit decision? I'm not clear, but I'm just thinking maybe there are several. There's a joint venture influence on application registration because usually it's a form with different sections that some data is needed for scoring and others might be needed for real estate assessment.
This sounds like customer-supplier relationship to me.
I'm still not clear who is upstream and who is downstream, and what is the definition of upstream and downstream again? It's a little
upstream
confused.
is the one who is defining the rules, and downstream is the one who is playing by the rules. You can imagine two cities. One is up the river, up the flow of the river, and another is down the flow of the river. So if the upstream, they spoil the water, then downstream cannot drink.
Okay, then I would say that scoring is upstream. I think they're defining the rules.
Do you think that scoring is upstream?
I'm actually almost sure.
Yeah.
I'm almost sure that about that.
I'm not so sure. Yeah. Yeah. So you think the scoring model will be propagating to application registration, but the application registration must be understandable by the customer. Huh? So I'm just I can understand your point, but I'm not completely sure that I would. Yeah.
There is another thing.
Ask yourself this question for upstream, downstream. If upstream has a action, does that affect your downstream or not? Right. So if scoring changes something, will that affect application registration or not? Or vice versa.
Then we are kind of constraining ourselves to the data flow. Because, well, okay, of course, when the data flows from A to B, A is always having an advantage in this situation. But I don't think upstream and downstream has anything to do with the data flow.
No, it wasn't about the data flow. Exactly, it's about decisions. So model decision, change in model decision, or the way they work, or they change their
I would say, to support the argument of Christian, I would also say, imagine the business which is running this. Who is going to have more influence?
Yeah.
I would think that scoring will be the guys behind the real business. And they will just come and say, oh, we are sorry, guys, you're doing it like this, and that's it.
I think they would say, in order to score, we need this data, and you should give us this data. We don't care how you get it.
Voila.
But does that make scoring upstream then?
I would say data change in the scoring model would propagate to the application registration.
Okay. And then, okay, let's say we do it this way. How about the data that is needed by a real estate assessment? Is that also upstream then? And then the application registration is also a kind of obedient to that?
That's a tricky one.
At first glance, it seems to be a similar situation.
Yeah, it's just I see the application registration as a big collection of a lot of data. And some might be related to scoring, others might not be related to scoring per se, but some other risk assessment. Or even just the data you need to register a customer kind of thing. Yeah. So how about that heuristic? Kenny was saying if you change something in the application form, would that implement scoring and real estate assessment?
I can hardly imagine they will let you change something which will influence their rules without asking them.
Okay. Yeah, well, so then if we go with this assumption, like scoring is upstream and application registration is downstream, what would you suggest that the kind of relationship between them? Are they customer supplier, or are they something else?
Should be customer supplier, and scoring and real estate are customers, and application registration is just a supplier, in my opinion. To support it,
that means you need to switch the upstream downstream.
Yeah, then that you're reversing that, because the upstream, the downstream is the side that can be the customer.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's like even though you're downstream, you can have some influence anyhow. That's how I understand it. So
yeah,
that's application registration.
That's exactly it. Yeah. A customer has influence on, and maybe even veto power, as they say. So the customer, in this case, let's say application registration is downstream and scoring is upstream, like you say it. Then if you have a customer supplier relationship, then the application registration is customer. Since the customer is asking the supplier, in this case scoring, to supply, to get new functionality in, or develop some stuff on that side. So
hold on, they're downstream. They're kind accepting everything.
Customer is downstream.
So customer is downstream?
Yeah.
Yes. Because
it's
if
a
they
bit weird because the arrow is
the
customer supplier, the arrow is reversed. So that's always the confusing part, and it confused me a lot of times as well. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just can't. I don't have the fantasy or imagination to think how what kind of veto power can application registration bounded context have on scoring, because scoring has a set of strict rules. Yeah. So what kind of influence?
I would also think that scoring will have the veto power, and application registration just follows everything.
This would make application registration a conformist, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if that's the case, then it's not this guy, but the CF we have done before. So I'm just to copy different alternatives. So then it's like this. Yeah.
As I put in the chat, right? If you look at Eric Evans' pattern book, it's on the domainlanguage.com. It says agile teams can make the downstream team play the customer role to the upstream team in planning sessions. So meaning your application registration has influence on what scoring needs to build, their priorities or what they need to build. So that's a customer supplier. If the application registration has nothing to say to scoring, that means it's a conformist relationship. And there's a difference between what is and what you want, right? So there's a difference to what it is now and what you want it to be. But I think you talk about what is it now.
Yeah, yeah. So we are actually listing two alternatives here. One is the conformist and the other is customer supplier. But I'm raising the question, I can't think of any example that application registration could influence the modeling of scoring. But yeah. But however, I'm just also not convinced that the scoring is completely upstream, though. Because then,
why aren't you?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just I just feel the scoring model is not directly propagating to application registration. It's the other way around. It's somehow the yeah, I don't know. I'm a little conflicted with myself, I guess.
Maybe we can ask the expert now.
Yeah. Is Michael here?
He just popped up.
Yes, I just popped in.
Okay. Yes, Michael, we are not agreeing, and we are, well, I am at least confused. I can only speak for myself. The group, I think the other teammates, buddies, proposed that scoring is upstream and application is downstream, and then we can either have a conformist relationship if application registration doesn't have any say, or we can have a customer supplier relationship where application registration has a little influence at the downstream. But I'm a little confused myself because about the downstream and upstream. I think it's also plausible that application registration is upstream because it has relationship to credit decision and real estate assessment as well. If it's downstream, then it has to be downstream to a lot of other domains, and that's kind of messy. And now I stop. I will ask, what is the definition of upstream and downstream in this concrete example?
Basically,
the influence is bidirectional.
Upstream, downstream is a unidirectional influence. Actions of one team have an impact on the other and not the other way around. Mutually dependent is a bidirectional influence. Yeah, that, let's say, application registration scoring would be in a mutually dependent team relationship. Then actions in scoring have an influence on application registration, and actions in application registration have an influence on scoring. I think that's something we don't have there. Ask yourself the following question. What is the impact of the scoring team changing their rules, their internal structure, how they assess and credit application on the application registration? None. They get the application form in, and after that, they can perform whichever rules they want. Without application forms, there will be no scoring. However, when the application registration team does something, it can have an impact on scoring. So application registration is upstream and scoring is downstream. Yeah, because scoring, I mean, they can change the assessment of a no-go criteria however they want. Does it affect the application registration? No. They can change the calculations, internal values, how they get to green or red. Does it have an impact on application registration? No, not at all. However, the other way around, when the application registration team decides, we go from a 40 field application form to a marketing, sales compliant 10 field application form, it will have an impact, and a pretty severe impact on scoring. Yeah.
Doesn't this mean that scoring can veto this change, which would make them the driver?
And this is where it gets interesting. So the first relationship type that we have there is upstream application registration, downstream on the scoring. And then we need to think, is a powerless scoring team, a scoring team which is fully dependent on the mercy of the application registration team, something that we want? And I think the obvious answer is no. We want to grant them some influence. Yeah, because when the application registration team, this is a marketing, a sales-driven team, basically. Yeah, they get paid by the amount of applications they get in. Yeah, when they come up with, hey, we have a cool new form, 5 information fields, and you're in for a mortgage loan. The scoring team should have a say in there and say, no, that's not going to work for us. So this is why I would add a customer-supplier relationship to that, to give scoring some influence over the priorities of the upstream team.
Yeah, okay. So just to paraphrase and verify my understanding, you're kind of like saying that the application registration, since it's customer facing, so it's usually some customer journey kind of people that decides what goes into that application form, and because a bank would have some risk management requirements that sort of feed into the application form, but it doesn't control how a application form looks like eventually.
Exactly.
So it's still application registration is upstream, but scoring has some limited influence, and therefore that makes it a customer at downstream.
I would say I'm pretty sure we both mean the same. I would say scoring has a defined influence, yeah, around a certain piece. Yeah. So we define a certain piece of influence. Yeah. And please do that. Yeah. Not that everyone says, I want that from you. I want that from you. I want that from you, because then you bog down the whole application landscape. You're getting totally away from independent teams. Yeah. So
yes, but Michael, yeah.
For instance, you can say,
Go ahead.
Scoring may ask application registration once per year to change the form. Yeah, to add information or to remove stuff. Yeah, that's something that is a defined set of influence. Yeah? When application registration wants to simplify the form, scoring can have a veto. And the same can be true for the real estate assessment. It's the same thing. Yeah, because that's what I see as a very big problem in very big grown application landscapes. I'm quickly getting the other groups in again. In very big application landscapes is that the set of influence is not defined. that everyone can wish something, that everyone can ask for something. And then you're bogged down by huge governance boards and huge meetings. And in the end, you end up with a foul compromise every time because it's just politics that are being played out there. And that's something that we actually don't want.
Exactly, but doesn't that speak for making application registration an open host service then? Like having so many customer influences from all sides?
Oh, you bring up a great question. Let's wait with that question when all participants are in. Is a customer supplier against the open host service a good idea?
No, that's probably a very bad idea. Because if the power of scoring is very high, it can actually veto the whole process and nobody gets progress, right?
Exactly. All right. Welcome back, everyone. I was just in a very interesting discussion with Xin, with Xin, and we raised the question, is a customer-supplier relationship against an open host service a good idea? What do you think? What's your opinions?
Can you repeat the question?
Can you sharpen the question? What do you mean against?
Okay, so you have an open host service.
Yes.
And you have a bunch of consumers of that open host service on the downstream. And one or two of those consumers, they are in a customer supplier relationship to the upstream system. Is that a good idea? And what would be the consequences of that?
Wouldn't that influence everything? So one changes would influence on the other one?
So few of the services can influence the other services with having these dependencies if they influence the open service.
Yeah, exactly.
Be
careful. Yeah, the message is be careful with that. An open host service is an interface, an API for a broad range of consumers. Yeah. Now, when you grant certain consumers an VIP access to the open host service, yeah, you run the risk that they indirectly also have an influence on the other teams. I've seen a very nasty example for that. I think it was 4 years ago at a company in southern Germany. And one of my friends, a very good friend of mine is the IT manager there. And she leads many teams, and she complained to me, "Oh, Michael, we are making no progress. Everything sucks. It's all horrible and whatsoever." And we started drawing a context map in order to find out what's going on. And we found out, hey, there is one open host service. Yeah, one team provided an open host service. They were the upstream. They had, I think, 5 or 6 teams in the downstream who all had anti-corruption layers against the open host service. So far, so good. For most of the teams, especially for 2 teams, the integration with the open host service was very important. For one team, it was pretty optional. And what that team did was very often saying, "Oh no, you can't do that. We have no time, we have no budget, the risk is too high for us." So they were in what I call a vetoing customer and helpless supplier relationship. So they were not really a customer in the sense that they had requirements for the others. They were just vetoing around. Yeah, that's not in the sense of the customer supplier pattern. I would say that's an anti-pattern version of the customer supplier pattern, so to say. Yeah. But what happened is that this team was able to block the progress of all the other teams because they were successful with their vetoes. And in the end, we found out that this was a political foul play by our manager of the one team. It was very, very specifically trying to block certain other teams in making progress in order to look good in the organization. Yeah? That's a problem. Yeah. Sometimes you want to have something like that, but please be aware of the consequences and look how you define the influence of the customer. Yeah? That's very important then. Did any group discuss a potential candidate for a published language?
We did.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did.
Okay. Tell me.
We briefly discussed that application registration could be a candidate for a published language because it has a lot of clients, and a lot of them probably have negotiating power. So in order not to let anybody take overhand, perhaps it would be good to have kind of a gentleman's agreement sort of thing. Yeah.
100 points. Exactly. Yeah. The application form in itself may be a very good candidate for a published language. Yeah, because there are many other bounded contexts that need it. It's used highly in the communication between the bounded contexts so that we can describe a model, yeah, in a way that other bounded contexts can translate in and out of that. Yeah. And the application registration can have an open host service which speaks that model. And the same goes also for the application check. Application marked as checked event, and you add the checked corrected application form in there. You can also speak that published language. And we also can grant a defined set of influence on that published language. For instance, in that, I would say in that committee, defining the application form, I would put in the registration, scoring, and real estate assessment. Yeah. So you can limit the influence of the customer part of the customer supplier pattern on the published language. And that they tell them, hey, just deliver us the thing in that language and it's all good. Yeah? How they get their form, whatever, is not in their influence. And so that would be a perfect candidate for a published language. Absolutely. That's what I wanted to hear. Do you have any questions?
Can we talk about a little bit about the customer supplier in this to application registration, scoring, and real estate assessment? How do you perceive that? What is the decision factor that you say this is a customer and this is a supplier?
That's a very good question. So first of all, I would start with the team relationship. Yeah, I would say the context map knows 3 different kinds of team relationships. One is mutually dependent. That's a bidirectional influence between 2 teams. Actions of one team have an influence on the other, and it's the other way around as well. Yeah? So they are very tightly coupled. Upstream, downstream is a unidirectional set of influence. The actions of one team have an influence on the other team, but it's not the other way around. And then finally you have free, which is there is no real influence between those 2 teams. Customer supplier is only relevant for upstream, downstream relationships. Yeah. Usually the upstream team has all of the power and the downstream team is helpless, as some people in the literature like to call it. Yeah? Now, but we want to grant the downstream a defined set of influence. Now, in our case study, let's take a look at application registration and scoring. the first question to ask, which team relationship is it? I think actions in the application registration that have an impact on the application form do have an impact on scoring. Actions of scoring in the way how they calculate their pre-scoring red, pre-scoring green, main scoring red, main scoring green have no influence at all on the application registration. So application registration is upstream, scoring is downstream. Now, the next thing to think about is take a look at how those teams are driven. I think application registration is a team that is very marketing and sales driven. Yeah, with a blinkering eye, you can say they get paid for the amount of loan applications they bring in. Yeah, the more they bring in, the better. So they may come up with the idea, we do a loan application form with just 10 values. Yeah, easy mortgage loans. Great. I think the scoring team will say, folks, that's not the best idea. Yeah, that's not feasible for us. In order for us to do our job, you need to provide us with the following model. Yeah, and they need to have that influence. So when they come up with new rules, with new ideas for rules, yeah, I think we should give them a chance to also grab more information through the application form. So we could put them in a customer relationship and the application registration in a supplier relationship. The same actually also applies to the real estate assessment part. It's the same thing. Yeah. Yuns has a question. How do you define those relationships without talking about the strategic classification of each context? Yeah, I think the strategic classification of each context goes a long way there. Yeah, it really helps you. But I wouldn't consider it to be 100% necessary. I think if you look into my slide deck, which I've shared on the Miro board as well, you will see me at the end of the deck discussing some impacts of the strategic classifications, some heuristics around that. Yeah. For instance, do I want to have a bounded context in a core domain being a conformist against one in a generic subdomain? I think that's not the most useful model around, in many cases. Yeah? I mean, there are always exceptions and whatever, but I would say as a general purpose answer, not the greatest idea. Yeah, I think this helps, yeah, but it's consider that to be an add-on help for the discussion. Yeah.
I meant by that in this case the example you took between scoring and application registration, what would be the motivation to change the influence, introducing a customer-supplier relationship, if not about the fact that scoring looks like a core context? I mean, what would be the motivation apart from that?
I mean, in the end, let's say scoring is generic for whichever reasons. Yeah. They still need to be able to do their job. Yeah, and if they are helpless, they won't be able to fulfill their capability.
But then I guess you could introduce that pattern everywhere you have an upstream, downstream.
Be careful. Let's say the credit decision. Yeah, I think it is a very strategic decision, but not so much on the level of. I mean, yeah, the strategic classifications can play a role in there, but let's take credit decision. Yeah, credit decision is generic. Let's say it like that. Yeah, and well, we tell credit decision, hey, you can display everything you want in your credit decision templates. You can ramp up your credit decision hierarchy in any way, however you want, based on the stuff that's being offered to you, but you take no influence on the other stuff at all.
Okay.
You just play, take it or leave it.
Mm-hmm.
You get no influence. Yeah, you can get what the others offer you. Great. Yeah, do whatever you want with that. But you don't go to scoring and tell them, hey, we don't want green or red. We want emojis. You don't do that.
Okay, thank you. So I guess there is an underlying heuristic there to define, like when you choose one or the other. But
yeah. Look at my
a related.
Yeah.
Sorry. A related question to this credit decision example you just mentioned. I was just thinking for that consortium we talked about, those people with influence. I'm just thinking about a heuristic. Who do you want to put in that consortium? Because you want that consortium to be as small as possible. So in this context, you put scoring in the consortium, and probably you also want to put what's on the right side of that. Real estate assessment. I think it's mentioned. And suppose you have these potential customer supplier relationships. Then you put those concepts in the consortium, but you don't put generic subdomains in that consortium, like credit decision. Isn't that what you're saying? Because they, anyway, are kind of conformist.
In most cases, and many most cases, I would say yes. However, under circumstances, there may be exceptions. Yeah. So that may be the case. Yeah. The answer is it depends. But if you go for that as a general purpose heuristic, I think you're on a pretty decent path. Yeah. That's most of the time applicable. The same as the open host service is upstream. Yeah, I would say in 99% of the cases, that's the case. However, I've also seen the case where we had an open host system, which was definitely a downstream system. Yeah, but that was a very exceptional case. Yeah, and it had to do with an extremely strong regulator. Yeah. But
I had the same experience there.
Yeah.
I had the same experience there. Open host system and downstream with the regulator.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's something that can, and a very strong regulator. Yeah. That's something, that can happen. Yeah. But that was the only exception that I've ever seen where an open host service was downstream. Have you seen other cases, Kenny?
No.
What's actually your take on this published language thing? Does every open host service always publish a published language? Or do you see open host service as a standalone thing? What's your take on that?
There is always a language published. The question is, there's always a language. The question is it formally published or not?
Yeah.
What do you mean with exactly how published that is? It's a general good idea to have it. I'm just thinking about examples where there isn't a formal published language, and I cannot think of any at this moment. Most have APIs, so why else would you be an open host service? Well, actually, to be honest, I come from the embedded electronics, and before you all had these smart thermostats, correct word?
Yeah,
I had my own thermostat, and I could hook in. I could actually integrate on it, but it was an open host, but I needed to use the bits and the bytes and send stuff over lower level communication. So it didn't have a published language. I needed to find that out and re-engineer it from the start. So there sometimes is, but yeah, it's not really so useful, right? So that would be an example that if you know you can integrate with it, but they just didn't take the effort to publish it. The language, a good API. So there, there are examples, but not in the business consultancy I'm in at the moment, which is mostly financial. You wouldn't generally see that.
All right.
I have a question about perception versus reality. Has it happened to you that you built a context map and, for example, customers or some teams have the opinion that some open host uses a published language? However, this doesn't correspond to reality. They're using some proprietary language, only they understand. I mean, when you model the system based on context maps, has it happened to you that you discover some differences compared to reality, where some people get mad because they disagree with your findings?
Most of the time. And that's why you want to do that. Yeah. You want to, I always say one of my main tasks is making explicit stuff, making implicit stuff explicit. And this may lead to tension. Yeah, of course. I often see disagreements, but what I do is that usually when I do context mapping in rather difficult environment, I usually discuss the patterns and how we interpret them beforehand with the teams and the folks who are involved in there. So that they know, okay, that's how they see that, that's how they see this. And here and there, you will have some pieces where everyone, where a lot of people disagree with certain things. Yeah, and that's something that needs to be discussed then. Yeah.
So I just linked a tweet to Ruth Malan.
Yeah.
And I think we need to remind people that things like context mapping, there's no output here. So the context map, and Wortley says it itself, the Wortley map is not the artifact. It's the journey, it's the conversation, it's the collaboration, it's the feedback loop you get from it. So yeah, you definitely take assumptions, but then maybe a week later you found out, we learned something new.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's not a one-off, it's a continuous learning.
Definitely, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I've also seen some idea for context maps with rather strict governance models being loosened up after 4 months because we realized that's basically not necessary. So let's not do it. Yeah, we learned something, and that's always a good thing. All right.
I'm still trying to understand open host service at downstream. Both you and Kenny said you knew some examples, but for me it's a bit counterintuitive because open host service is by definition you have a lot of clients, and you are usually upstream to your many clients. How can you be a open host service with many clients at the downstream side? What does that make your many clients then? All of them being upstream, having influence on you? How would you ever tolerate and cope with that?
So,
sorry.
The example that I saw was there was a regulator that forced certain companies to provide a certain interface in a certain structure for quite a few of their applications, of the regulators' applications. So the regulator came to the organizations and they told them, you provide this open host service in this structure with this output for us. And when we tell you that you change something, you have to change that. Yeah, so it was a service. Yeah, and many organizations had to provide the same thing. Yeah, and they had applications that talked to that service. Yeah, so each service had multiple clients. Yeah, but the team providing the open host service was absolutely helpless. Yeah, they had no say in this thing at all. Yeah, they just needed to comply. So in this case, they were downstream because every action of the regulator in this concern had an impact on them. And
so the regulator is upstream.
Yeah, exactly. And the regulator had the clients.
Okay. The regulator has the clients. Okay.
Yeah.
So that makes all the clients also upstream. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Was your case similar, Kenny?
Yeah. The regulator just demanded. Demanded what they want to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I misunderstood your examples. I thought the regulator or the context in the upstream is only one context, but now I understand that there are many people behind the regulator. Yeah, the many people, many contexts.
Is it like that if you have such a relation that is open host and it's downstream, is it like something a little like published language? Because you decide what is language between all those.
Yeah, there's definitely a published language involved there.
Yeah, because there's a regulator who decide what kind of language you will talk to those downstreams, your clients.
Yeah, I definitely see a published language there.
Doesn't it make then the regulator the open host?
No, because the regulator doesn't.
No, they ask you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right.
But you won't see this oftentimes. So
yeah,
it's a nasty pattern that you will only usually see in that case, that regulatory side. As far as I've seen it, maybe
banking and insurance, that's where you see it most of the time.
Yeah.
Maybe I see a potential also in terms of cars, when the connectivity of cars races and regulators demand certain interfaces to cars. That maybe another case, yeah. But I think let's see how that goes. Yeah, but it's nasty, it's rare, and please, yeah, as a rule of thumb, in most of the cases, stick to open host is upstream. Yeah, and I think you have a very good starting point for a discussion.
Okay, Michael, I just want to give you feedback. I really like your distinction between open host service and published language. They do not necessarily have to go together, like in Van Vernen's book.
Mm-hmm.
I actually like the analogy of the consortium, that there are multiple parties that need to agree on the published language, like the Google case, the Google Map example. That unilateral decision about a language probably doesn't make it a published language. I think that's quite useful for me.
That's my personal take, how I use that. I know quite a few other folks who say the model from the Google Maps API is a published language because it's a published part. There is a language from Google which is being published there. If you go through the formal definitions, you can go one way or another. And my to be honest, my personal opinion that if someone provides an open host service, I expect them to have a well-defined interface, including the language that they give out through that open host service. Yeah. If they don't have that, maybe it's a messy open host service or something like that. But my personal take here, yeah, that's something that is very applicable for me and the work that I do. Maybe I'm breaking some rules here. Can be the case.
So going into the official Eric Evans, he also says often combined with open host service.
Exactly.
So yeah, I agree with that statement myself as well, because sometimes, as you said, people might provide a published language, but then you try it out and then it's like, what? No, it's like speaking to a language, speaking to a country with several languages.
Yeah,
I don't know which language they will reply in. So
yeah.
Not a well-defined published language.
I mean, I need to give credit to Vaughan in the text. Yeah, he also has often combined with published language, but in the images in his books, I think I haven't seen one open host service without a published language in any image. Yeah, and that's where I sometimes. Where I once came into a discussion with a team, they said, "Hey, look at that. We see that it's always the case." And I was like, "Ah, no, I don't think so." Yeah, maybe he wasn't aware with regards to the images. I don't know, but in the text, it's very clear as well.
Yeah, but I think the reason why I like your way of seeing it, Michael, is because you open up the possibility to use published language not only in terms of interface and implementation, but also in terms of organizational relationship. Because if you need several parties to agree on that one, then there is a coordination relationship as well, if we can generalize.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. One last thing for today. At the end of the Miro board, I added a voucher for my DDD book. And if you want to read a very lengthy discussion, this book is about the case study that we have just gone through. Yeah, it's also in the book. And this book has some theory part, but also many exercises regarding that case study around bounding context, technical design patterns, and also context maps. So if you want to reread a lot of that stuff, there is a voucher where you can get it cheaper, the book. And otherwise, if you have any further questions, I'm happy to answer. I'm on all platforms. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and so on. So feel free to hit me up with any further questions. And I enjoyed the evening with you. I hope you had a great time again as well. And I hope you managed to learn a little bit about context maps.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I learned a lot, really. Thank you.
The board details, wait a minute, I'll repost them in a second. I'll
post them in a link as well.
Sure. I'll leave the board up. Yeah, so you can, there are a lot of extra boards. So if you want to take this exercise with your team or with your mates, I think boards 5 to 10 are untouched, so to say. Grab one and play around with it.
Good. Okay. And with that, we're going to close the session. I'm going to leave Zoom open for just a few more minutes, but I'm going to close the stream. Thank you, everyone who's still watching on the YouTube side. Thank you for joining. I hope you learned a lot. And in the next 2 to 3 weeks, there will be new sessions, a small sneak peek. Next week on Tuesday, we'll talk with Dave Farley about test-driven development as a design tool. So be sure to tune in to that. Tomorrow we'll go live, and see you next time. And go to our virtual VDD platform to learn more.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
and
so
thanks,
much.
Michael,
Bye.
for
Thanks a lot.
the session.
Thanks guys
for having me.
for